let's so I was talking about media bias, all right? Now, why does how can we look at corporate media and understand the bias that corporate media has, and what that means for political discourse in our country, and why does it matter? You hear there's this prevailing idea that anybody on the left, when they complain or they criticize, that they're engaging in censorship and they're just being mean, and then you're just a Bernie bro and you just hate people, and you're being so divisive. But which to a certain extent, okay, I get it. I do think a lot of like Bernie supporters, like myself, we do have to take a look in the mirror and be honest about maybe some of the messaging and organization, especially online, wasn't as conducive as we thought it was. We can be honest about that. We can have a conversation about that. But if you don't recognize how established media was stacked against Bernie Sanders, his Bernie Sanders policies are 10 times more popular than Bernie Sanders as a candidate, like Medicare for All, because of the framing, because of how media constantly framed him. There was a big controversy during the election over Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg was seen as like, he just came out of nowhere. He was his mayor from who cares where, Indiana, and then it was like they just Pete Buttigieg. Look at him. He's young and he says things, and he's a gay man from the military. He's a. But then the mean left just came out and was criticizing him and all of this. Well, Pete Buttigieg, a big point of contention among the left was he worked for McKinsey. McKinsey is a huge, massive, lot of big money. What do you call it? It's one of those, consultation firms. We do consulting to help you with your brand image and all of this. And a bunch of news came out, or a big story came out today about McKinsey in the New York Times. I know I was just bagging on the New York Times, but again, the the editorial department can put out good stuff. It's not, there's no knock on kind of issues with the the editorial department doesn't mess up the news side of things. It's the news side that put out this story. Check this out. McKinsey proposed paying pharmacy companies rebates for Oxycontin overdose victims. This is Anand Girardis saying, a breathtaking report just dropped in New York Times on how McKinsey enabled the peddlers of the opioid crisis, one manslaughtery PowerPoint at a time. Quote, this is the banality of evil MBA edition. Wow. That's something he said, Anand said. If you don't know about the banality of evil, look up Anna Arendt. She was a moral philosopher, psychologist who survived the Holocaust. And she talked about the banality of evil. But this is really concerning, this whole thing, because literally... I like this guy, Jordan Ewell, on Twitter. I can't wait till these people die so I can piss on their graves. This is the story from the actual story. McKinsey proposed paying pharmacy companies rebates for Oxycontin overdoses. Court filings reveal consultants talk of a records purge during the opioid crisis and shed new light on sales advice given to the billionaire Sackler family and their drug company, Purdue Pharma. Let's see here. Documents released last week in the federal bankruptcy court in New York show that advisor was the McKinsey & Company, the world's most prestigious consulting firm. The 160 pages include emails and slides revealing new details about McKinsey's advice to the Sackler family, Purdue's billionaire owners, and the firm's now notorious plan to, quote, turbocharge Oxycontin sales. Turbocharge Oxycontin sales at a time when opioid abuse had already killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. In a 2017 presentation, according to the records, which were filed in court on behalf of multiple state attorneys general, McKinsey laid out several options to shore up sales. One was to give Purdue's distributors a rebate for every Oxycontin overdose attributable to the pills they sold. Really sit with that. A rebate. You guys are losing a client. That's a problem. How are we gonna strategize over this contingency? You're going to lose business because your product's killing people. What can we do about that? I mean, this is some, this is carrion capitalism. I mean, this is picking at the bones of the dead to try and profit off of death and destruction and pain and misery. This is really harrowing stuff. I mean, and again, it's in the banal, boardrooms of really super wealthy families and just a few families and this one consulting firm. Let's see here. Jeez. Now, this is, guys, this stuff is bad. This is very, very bad. But, there were a lot, again, being a lefty, and I was a diehard Bernie supporter, we were told, you guys are being too mean to Pete Buttigieg. What's with all the rat emojis and all the snake emojis for Elizabeth Warren? Pete Buttigieg worked for McKinsey. He worked for this company, this consulting firm that was recommending, hey, you should get a rebate on all these overdose victims because your product keeps killing people. This is part of what's toxic about our politics and how corporate news and corporate media reinforces that. Corporate news has a revolving door for people from McKinsey to, their talking heads, people that they pay, consultants, right? That's what they're called, consultants, to just come on and whitewash corporate malfeasance or, corporate crimes. And people like Buttigieg are helping to craft that information. This is before he worked for the CIA. This is, he did that just before he, and as he enlisted, he was working for this company. And there's actually a really interesting clip. And again, the New York Times, I was, kind of giving some crap to the New York Times, but this just shows you the difference, of how print journalists will treat politicians differently. Because guess what? We don't have shows. Well, I got this live stream thing I'm doing, but, print journalists don't have cable syndicated shows where they want people to keep coming on, and they know if they do a hard-hitting interview, people just aren't going to come on because they don't want to get roasted in front of the whole world, right? But so this is a New York Times, I believe it's the editorial staff, really grilling this guy, Pete Buttigieg, on what he did with McKinsey. So check this out.
You've been on the front lines of corporate downsizing. You've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing. You've been on the front lines of our misadventures in foreign policy. You've had direct experience of many of the things that make a lot of young people very angry about the way that this country is operating right now. You don't seem to embody that anger.
So the proposition that I've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing is just to get that out of the way.
He used to
You
swear,
worked for a
guys.
company that was fixing bread prices.
No.
You worked for a company that was fixing bread prices. That was a big scandal in Canada, I believe.
For a consulting company that had a client that may have been involved in fixing, or was apparently in a scandal.
You hear all the verbal padding he puts in between I worked for a company that consulted with a company that may have been possibly.
I was not aware of the Canadian bread pricing scandal until last night.
But do you feel the anger that
He just conveniently didn't know about this scandal.
many young people feel about the state of this?
Yeah, of course, because it destroyed my city. I grew up surrounded by crumbling factories and empty houses. My city lost 30,000 of its 130,000 people, largely before I was born. So I'm under no illusions about the problems that are present in American capitalism generally, and were unleashed beginning with the Reagan era specifically. And while I may not be as emotive sometimes about my sense of anger or frustration or injustice, I would not be doing any of this if I were not propelled by a level of passion.
Okay, so we do know from Buttigieg's time with McKinsey that he actually was involved with trying a plan to privatize the post office. Remember how everyone was up in arms about the Trump administration and what they were doing to the post office and trying to hobble it before the election, but also just trying to strip away as much of it as they could. Pete Buttigieg was part of a strategy group that wanted to privatize the post office. So I'm glad to see that McKinsey is getting this news out, this recent news about how they were involved in the opioid crisis, because this is interesting. I've talked for years about Trump's corruption and his open alliances with corporate, big corporate companies, corporate donors, and what's interesting is, like during the impeachment, like blatant corruption, blatant political corruption, trying to garner favors to help you in an election, trying to give away favors for foreign help, right? Total, just he was criming it up right then. That was a big crime that Trump did, whether or not the Republican Senate held him accountable for it. But during that time, you'd always hear from Republicans and right-wingers, how come the media wants to focus on Trump, and Orange Man bad, but what about the opioid crisis? What about blah, 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 blah? They would divert to all of the many ongoing crises that are extant in America at any given time. They will bring those up and wag them in your face when they want to change the subject. But here we have a good example of how this type of crisis, the opioid epidemic, directly involves corruption, but just everything Bernie's been talking about, greed, the avarice of corporate and millionaire, billionaire, the wealth class in America, how they can get their way. And, no, it's not enough to know that there are overdoses, that you're pushing a public health crisis, you're killing people with your product, but hey, we might find a great way for you to make some money off the back end from all those people dying. That they have slick, suited people ready to make arguments in court and otherwise to help you, to help these interests continue to profit off of people, off of despair. It's like a despair factory. It's terrible. But you only ever hear about it when they're trying to deflect from something Donald Trump has been up to. So this is why it's not enough to just hate corporate media, like our twice banned friend in the chats. In the what is hates corporate media. It's not just enough to hate corporate media, and you have to have a robust understanding and some policy sets and belief behind it and some ideology behind it to understand why these things are wrong, how they're wrong. You can just say, oh, it's the corporate media is all bad and Trump is good, but then what follows behind that? Or the belief that Trump is good because he attacks corporate media. Well, but why does he's not attacking corporate media because he cares about the downtrodden of America. He's doing it for his own interests. That's what it's about. That's what it's always been about. And that's why the right is very good at playing the refs. They're very good at pushing, corporate media in the direction they want by constantly calling it biased. New York Times during the primary, when Bernie was running and Bernie was pulling ahead, they ran this story, the New York Times, about the Democratic Party is moving more to the left, and how's that going to affect the election? And I swear to you, this story, you can go find it, quoted 5 Republicans, and not a single Democrat, not a Democratic consultant, not a Democratic House member, nobody that was a Democrat at all was quoted. But you know who was? 5 Republicans to tell us how the Democratic Party was going to the left. So that's the game that's being played, people. It's a game. It serves the powerful. It serves the wealthy. I'm not the only. A lot of people are saying it. I'm not the only one saying it. A lot of people. But yeah. So Valor in the chat asked, "Why does it look like a movie?" Because it's the New York Times, and they want it to look nice and slick. For when Pete Buttigieg gets roasted by one of their guys. I thought that was kind of fun. That it was in such high def clarity for the roasting of Pete Buttigieg.